Hello, everyone. My name is Peter Benz. I am the Director of Investment Management for Infinity Benefit Solutions. I'm going to take a few minutes this morning to walk you through a best practice for administering a 401k plan that pertains to maintaining a fiduciary file for all of your 401k related materials. This is a newer concept, but it's one that's beginning to take hold in the industry because it can do a lot of great things as far as helping with your organization and compliance with regards to the 401k. And so what we're going to do is take a look at what and why do you maintain a fiduciary file. We're going to look at some of the different components that would go into it. And you see them here. It's plan documents, regulatory notices, all your investment monitoring information, an investment policy statement, fidelity bond information, and meeting minutes. So we'll dive into all of these topics individually here. And within a few minutes, I think give you a really good idea on something you could do to implement quickly and really improve the overall administration of your 401k plan. So to get right into it, what is a fiduciary file? What do I mean when I say fiduciary file? Well, this is essentially taking all of the information that is housed typically in a number of different places, some internally at the business, some with your 401k record keeper or outside third-party administrator, or potentially even with some outside insurance vendors, and housing all that information in one consolidated place. And the advantages of doing this is that not only would you be able to more quickly access information if you ever asked for it by an employee or a regulator, it also significantly assists in the event of an audit. And we recognize that audits are not something that happen all the time, but if you have a well-designed and well-maintained fiduciary file, the 401k aspect of that Department of Labor audit is going to go very, very well, and you are going to have a lot of goodwill with the regulator if they do catch anything. And so, although a little bit of work might go into getting this thing put together, it is a real nice protection for the business and will make just the day-to-day administration easier because you're not scrambling to go find stuff if you ever need it. It would all be in one consolidated place. So what goes into a fiduciary file? Well, a number of things, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago. First and foremost, it's a place where you can put all of your plan documents. And these are probably something that you know where to access right now through a 401k website, or potentially you would email your advisor or your third-party administrator for them. But here you would put them all together in one consolidated place, whether that's an electronic file or paper, if you still prefer to maintain just a file folder in a file cabinet somewhere in the office. But the plan documents, what I mean by that are essentially all of the legal governing documents pertaining to the 401k plan. So there's your adoption agreement or plan document, which determines all of the actual features and components of your 401k plan. There's the summary plan description, which is the more streamlined information, slightly more abridged version of all of the plan features. And it's something that you need to have readily accessible because there's an expectation from the regulators that if you get asked by an employee for the summary plan description, that you're able to produce it essentially, immediately. And so if you have a fiduciary file with it right there, you'll definitely be able to clear that bar. And then if you ever make any plan amendments to your plan, you would keep those in your fiduciary file as well, along with the summary material modifications, which is the formal employee notice regarding any plan amendments. So first and foremost, we would be looking for all of those governing plan documents to be held as one component of the fiduciary file. Along the same lines, there are also regulatory notifications. And these are the documents that need to go out to the employees periodically throughout the course of the year. The most common, or the one you find with every 401k plan, regardless of how it's designed, is the participant fee disclosure. So the annual notice to the employees about the fees that they pay inside the 401k plan and associated with the underlying investments. And then there's also an annual summary annual report, which really is just kind of a transparent accounting back to the participants in the plan that all the money is where it's supposed to be and that the 401k is in solid financial shape. And then depending on how your plan is actually designed, you may have a qualified default investment alternative, a QDIA. There's an annual notice affirming that if it does apply. And if you're set up as a safe harbor plan, there's an annual notice that the employees would receive in the fourth quarter, notifying them of your intent to maintain that safe harbor for the following plan year. And so the idea here is that not only are you keeping a copy of all of these notices so that you can document to anyone that ever asks that you are aware of them and that you are distributing them, you also want to make sure that you keep a record of who they were sent out to and the dates that you sent them out. And this is really important. Even if you do not ever take the time to build a fiduciary file, if you are distributing these notices like you're supposed to already, make sure you're doing that as a best practice, because if an auditor comes in and they ask you what date did your summary annual report go out, if you don't know and you can't tell them exactly who it went out to, they're not going to give you credit for having done it, even if you did. So you need to make sure that you can document clearly who received these notices and the dates that they went out, and maintaining a fiduciary file helps you maintain that type of documentation if and when you ever were to need it. Moving on, there is obviously investment monitoring or investment suitability review that goes into maintaining a 401k plan. I think this is one area where most businesses have some process in place. You know, typically this would be a meeting with your advisor or some sort of internal committee that reviews the investments in the 401k and makes sure that they have meet all of the suitability necessary for the employees. And what you'd be doing is carving out a space in the fiduciary file where you actually maintain copies of any monitoring reports that you used or that were provided to you with regards to your investment monitoring and your investment oversight. Typical reports you may be receiving would be things like Morningstar reports on the underlying funds. I know some advisors use some third-party software like FI360 or RPAG. If you get those reports provided to you by your advisor, make sure you're keeping them in your fiduciary file, because it demonstrates that you're taking that care and due diligence to monitor those funds. You may also, along the same lines, work with a 321 investment advisor for your plan. If that's the case, they are, I'm sure, providing you some sort of quarterly or annual monitoring reports, and you would want to make sure that even though you may have an outside co-fiduciary on the investments, which is what a 321 investment advisor does, you want to make sure that you're keeping record or keeping a copy of any of those monitoring materials yourself, because there is an expectation that even when you've brought on an investment advisor to handle the monitoring, that you are doing some internal due diligence to keep appraised of their scoring and their methodology. So very important to maintain record showing that not only is this work being done, but that you're taking a look at it periodically to meet your fiduciary obligations. This next component is one that often gets overlooked, but you're finding a lot more focus on it now, and might be something that you've heard of before, but weren't sure exactly what it is. An investment policy statement is essentially a written declaration of what criteria you're going to use to build out your fund lineup and to actually monitor the funds available through the 401k plan. So the types of things that you would put into an investment policy statement would be essentially a line item of all the different asset classes that you want to include. And equally important, you would potentially line item any asset classes you specifically want to exclude, such as maybe you have no interest in having commodities or certain sector really specialized types of investment asset classes included in your fund lineup. You would dictate that in the investment policy statement. In the investment policy statement, you would also spell out exactly what your monitoring criteria would be. So if a fund underperforms for 2 quarters or 4 quarters, what is going to be your criteria working in conjunction with your advisors to remove a fund from the line from your underlying investment lineup? And this is a really important exercise because, one, it gives some clarity to how you want your 401k funds to be designed, and it also gives you pretty clear guidance on how to decide whether or not to remove a fund. And the good news here is that you typically are not going to be developing something like this completely on your own. If you work with an outside advisor, they likely have an investment policy statement already that you could make some small adjustments to, or even just sign and adopt as is. But it's a good thing to do because it takes all the guesswork out of what are we going to include from an available fund perspective and what would be the determining factor in removing one. I will say this, if you do have an investment policy statement in place, and I would encourage all of you to do so, you will be expected to stick to whatever criteria you put in place. So you do put a little bit more pressure on yourself to be consistent in how you manage the 401k. But I find from experience, the companies that do have an investment policy statement are aware of what is in it. They find the fund oversight and the fund monitoring to actually be much easier because it takes all the guesswork out of what to do and when. So once that investment policy statement has been established and adopted, that would be absolutely one of the components that you would put into your 401k fiduciary file. Another very important thing to have in your fiduciary file is information with regards to the ERISA fidelity bond. And this is a regulatory requirement. You hopefully are aware of this. It is an expectation that if you offer a 401k plan or a 403b plan for that matter that is governed by ERISA due to the terms of the 403b plan, you need to maintain a fidelity bond. And this is a form of liability insurance essentially that protects all of the participants in the event that some decision made by the employer or any of the administrators in the business that have oversight of the plan, if they make a decision that costs the employees money, you put in non-suitable fund in, or some mistake is made that causes money to go missing. You authorize a transaction to someone that was fraudulent and now money's been taken out of participant accounts. You don't have to do these things willingly. It could be completely, innocent and not intentional. But if any of those things arise, this insurance kicks in and it pays back into the plan to make the employees whole. And the statutory requirement on it is that it's 10% of plan assets up to $500,000 of coverage. And they figure that out by looking at how much money is in the plan at the start of the year. And then the expectation is by the end of that year, you'll have coverage equal to 10% of the plan assets at the start of the year. Once the plan gets over $5 million or more, you're only obligated to maintain $500,000 of coverage. Many businesses will go higher and stick to that 10% rule, but 500 is the most that's going to be expected by law. And what's important to maintain here is one, demonstrate that you have the fidelity bond so that if you ever get asked, or if you ever need it for that matter, you know where to go to get information about it. And it's absolutely going to be something that's going to be asked as part of an audit. And if you are in an audit situation, the quicker you can find the information that's being asked of you, the better everything's going to go all around. If you're unsure of whether or not you have this type of coverage, first place I would encourage you to check is with your property and casualty insurer. Most common in my experience, that is where you would have purchased this type of coverage. You may be getting it directly through your 401k company, but most likely it's part of your business insurance. You can tack it on as a rider to existing liability coverage you have. And so I would certainly encourage anyone that's unsure of whether or not they have this type of insurance in place to look into that. And if you do not, put it in place right away. And if you have any additional questions, you can certainly contact our team as well. We can help you identify whether or not that's in place or what to do in order to fix it. But once that insurance is in place, once you have that fidelity bond coverage established, you would keep a record of who the insurance is through, what the level of coverage you have, et cetera, inside your fiduciary file. And then the last component I want to talk about, it's meeting minutes. And this is actually something that a lot of companies do not do, and I would encourage them all to really strongly consider doing so moving forward. Really, in the meeting minutes, it's very straightforward. If you have any conversations or meetings, specifically on the 401k, have some level of written documentation about what was discussed. And especially if you take any actions like initiate a plan amendment or replace a fund, have some written record of who was in the meeting, what the rationale was behind the decisions that you made, and the date that the meeting occurred. And then keep that in a file, ideally your comprehensive fiduciary file. And it's a really, really important piece from a regulatory perspective of meeting your fiduciary obligations for ongoing oversight and due diligence on your 401k plan. I know many, many, many employers that do a lot of this work. They do all the hard stuff, which is actually taking the time out of their busy days to have a meeting, and they're doing all of the right things. But similar to what I mentioned about the regulatory notices and documenting when they're done, if you don't have a written record that you're doing these things, you won't always get credit for it. And you certainly want to have some level of documentation in place if you make some big plan change, because if there's ever a question of why you did it, you can quickly turn back to those notes and say, well, here was who was in the meeting, here's what our thought process was and why we implemented that change when we did. And it provides you an awful lot of protection in the event that anyone's ever questioning the what's or the whys with regards to some of the 401k administration. So very important to have, something that I would encourage everyone to do regardless of what action you may take with regards to a fiduciary file. Try to get in the best practice of keeping some kind of notes whenever you do a 401k meeting and hanging on to them in the your 401k files. It's something that you will be glad you have at some point down the road. I'm almost sure of it. So before we wrap here, just a couple of final thoughts. If you have a fiduciary file in place, you, without question, will have better plan compliance. And when you are more compliant with your 401k plan, you're going to have much happier regulators if they ever find their way into your office. And I recognize that none of us, absolutely none of us, want a Department of Labor audit to happen. But I can say for sure that you will be very, very glad that you have a fiduciary file set up and maintained if one ever happens. Because as they start to pepper you with requests, when you can sit them down and say, here's everything in our fiduciary file, that audit goes quicker. And if they do identify any issues, they're going to give you an awful lot more leeway and be a lot more forgiving of anything that you may have inadvertently missed when you've clearly put a lot of time and energy into maintaining good records and comprehensive documentation of your monitoring and administration of your 401k plan. And I would say, this is not something you have to build completely on your own. Leverage the service providers where you can. Your 401k administrators, your 401k advisor, your outside investment advisor, they're all going to have access to a lot of this information. And so just ask them to track it down for you. And then it's as simple as just dropping it all into a file and making sure that that gets maintained and updated over time. And if you're really feeling this is something that you would like to do, but you don't even know where to start, ask the experts. We here at Infinity Benefit Solutions have a lot of experience helping our clients get these types of files set up and maintained, and we'd be happy to sit down and talk with you about how that's worked for other groups, and we look to provide as much guidance and support as we possibly can. So if there's anything more we can do to help, or if you have any questions about what was discussed in today's presentation, my contact information is here. Feel free to reach out directly at any time. Always happy to help and happy to share what we know. So thank you, everyone, for your time and attention on this. Hopefully it was useful information. I wish you all the best. Have a great day.